Hello and welcome. So this is class 3 for the prenatal class series. So today we're doing movement for birth. So one of my favorite classes in this series, although actually they're all kind of my favorite class, but this is all about how you can learn some really simple movements to use during labor and birth to support your body to give birth, to help baby move through your body. And it's really interesting to learn these movements and realize that, you know, the way that you position your body in birth does impact how your body is, and also the tension and tone in your muscles impacts your bones in relation to how much they can stretch apart or not. So I think I think all of you did the class last week, or the recording. We did the pelvic bone orientation where we sat down and we did the rocking back to front, the lift of the sit bone, and we got a sense of the length of the pelvic floor front to back and the width of the pelvic floor side to side. And I'm pretty sure I said last week, it doesn't feel like a massive space, does it? But what's really important to remember is that during pregnancy, you get that massive release of relaxin. Sorry, during birth, you get that massive release of relaxin. Yes, you also get it in pregnancy, but you get more during birth, and that releases and relaxes the pelvic ligaments. So the ligaments that connect the pubic bone at the front, so the pubic symphysis is connected, and then the ligaments at the back, the pelvic ligaments, which attach the sacrum in the middle to the two pelvic halves. And so those bones literally stretch apart. It's amazing. But if you have tightness around the muscles and tension in the muscles, then it's going to be more difficult for those bones to stretch apart, even if the ligaments soften. And the other thing to note is that the way you move your pelvis and the way you move your legs can impact which part of the pelvis opens. So say we've got one half of the pelvis on either side, you can open the top more by doing some movements, and you can open the base more by doing other movements. Does that make sense? If this is your pelvis, yeah, this is the top. So some movements you open the top, so you would do that earlier in labor to get baby into the top of your pelvis. But later in labor, when you're actually wanting to push baby out, you would want to open the bottom of your pelvis, the outlet, and create more space in that region. And some of that can be definitely impacted by movements you do with your body. And we're not going to do it today, but we could do it another time if you wanted, like by movements your partner, your birth partner or support person can help you with, and also just positioning of your legs. So we're going to start very simply with the rotation and the diaphragm release, and then we'll go into some pelvic floor release. Okay, so I would love you to come down onto your sides on the mat and bring with you your roller or your pile of pillows or your bolster. And just so as we talked about, using your arms to get you down on your side, and popping the bolster or the pillows or the roller between your legs, whatever you have is totally fine. Interlace the hands around the back of your head and just shuffle your head back a little. So I'm not suggesting you would necessarily want to use the twist in labor, although you might do. You might just feel like a twist. I'm not sort of saying that the twist is necessarily going to change your pelvis, but it is going to release off the diaphragm a little. And if we can release off the diaphragm a little, remember that has implications into the pelvic floor. So releasing the diaphragm helps to release the pelvic floor. So we're going to lift the top elbow and then just shuffle your head back a little bit as you turn and rotate your chest backwards. So turning your breastbone towards the ceiling, and hopefully this is going to help with that little bit of tightness that Ashley, you said you had in that bra strap region. Just staying here as you breathe in. And as you exhale, just ease into the twist a little further. If you want to, remember you can put the underneath arm on the top knee to help anchor you down. Stay in the twist as you breathe in. And then just coming back to the start position. I always feel like that just feels really good. Okay, so straight into your diaphragm release. So take your top hand, pop it on the side ribs, and I want you to massage your fingers in underneath the lower ribs. So you're right at the upper abdominals and you're massaging right in up under those lower ribs. If it feels really intense, just be super gentle with a feather light touch. And if it feels really good, you can definitely create like a hook with your fingers and tuck your fingers in a lot more. Good. And then what I'd love you to do is just hold your fingers down at the base of the lower ribs, and let's breathe down to where your fingers are. So inhale, and as you breathe in, feel the diaphragm expand down, and the diaphragm pushes the fingers out from under the ribs, and breathe in a little more. Exhale, let it relax, and see if you can tuck your fingers deeper. Now, the more pregnant you are, definitely it becomes a little more tricky, but still give it a go. So we're going to take it twice more. So breathing down to where your fingers are, feel the diaphragm stretch down, pushing your fingers out from under your ribs. Breathing in a little bit more as you stretch the diaphragm down a little further. And then releasing, tucking the fingers deeper. And then the last one, so breathing down to where your fingers are. Breathing in, breathing down further. And then exhale, releasing, tucking the fingers a little deeper. And then we'll interlace the hands back around your head, lift your top elbow, but breathe your diaphragm down. Shuffle your head back a fraction as you rotate further or rotate into the twist. Remember, you can anchor the top knee if you'd like. Stay here as you breathe down into your diaphragm. And then rotate a little further if you can. Breathing in here. And then just coming back to your start position. Well done. So I want to do one more here. We're going to do your side rib release. So I want you to take your thumb and place it on the side ribs. And I want you to find a hollow between the ribs and then just massage the hollow. So you're massaging, so I'm starting quite low at the lower ribs. My thumb is in the hollow between two ribs and massaging, tracing that hollow up towards the bra strap and then coming back down. And then you can stay in the same hollow, or you might like to choose a different hollow. Good. And then just holding the thumb in the hollow, and we're going to breathe up into the side ribs. So I want you to inhale the ribs sideways up to the ceiling. And then exhale, soften. And we'll take it twice more. So breathing up to where your thumb is. Breathing the ribs sideways. See if you can feel the ribs expand under your thumb as you inhale, even a little more. And then exhale, soften. And then one more, breathing in. Breathing in more. Feel those ribs stretch wide, and then exhale, soften. Good. And then interlace the hands back around your head. Lift the top elbow as you inhale into the side ribs. Shuffle the head a little tiny bit back, and then rotating your chest back. Squeezing the top knee down. You can put the underneath arm on the top knee if you'd like. Breathe in here, and then ease into the twist a little further. Hopefully it feels like it's a little more released after doing the diaphragm and rib release. Breathing in there, and then just coming back to your start position. Well done. Okay, so I would love to stay on this side, and what I want you to do now is just make sure your knees are in front of your pelvis. So don't have them too low. You definitely want the knees up in front of the pelvis, and if you can, the shins forwards. Yeah, and then we're going to put the top hand just under the swell of the lower belly, so really low down on the lower abdominals. If at any point your shoulder gets tired, you're welcome to move your hand onto your side waist or down onto the floor. You can close your eyes for this if you want. We're just going to be staying in this position for a moment. So you're going to just take a few breaths in and out, and I want you to see if you can direct your breathing now to where your hand is. So as you breathe in, can you breathe into where you feel the light touch of your hand on your lower belly? And as you breathe in, can you allow the belly muscles to release, relax, and soften? And as you breathe out, can you allow the lower tummy muscles under your hand to release, relax, and soften even more? And that's it. We're not engaging your core and your breath out. We're not connecting the lower abs or the pelvic floor. We're actually trying to let them soften as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And staying with that, but then taking your attention down to your pelvic floor and visualizing the space of the pelvic floor from pubic bone at the front to tailbone at the back, and then sit bone from side to side. And see if you can get a sense of that in your mind's eye. That diamond shape or that kite shape. And now seeing if you can breathe down to your pelvic floor. So as you breathe in, can you allow the pelvic floor to release and relax? And as you exhale, can you also allow the pelvic floor to release and relax? And that's all. Okay, so you're breathing in, your hand might be on your lower belly still, or you might have moved it onto the side waist or the floor, and you're just allowing the breath in to let the belly soften as much as you can. And then release it more as you exhale. And now allowing the pelvic floor to soften as much as you can. And release it more as you exhale. We're going to just take a couple more breaths here. Just starting to check in that you're not holding tension through the outside of the top thigh or the hip or the shoulder or the neck. See if you can release around the jaw and the throat and the tongue. And if you're having trouble letting go in the pelvic floor, see if you can think or remember into the feeling that you have when you go to the toilet to have a wee and you sit down on the toilet. And to let the wee come out, you have to relax the pelvic floor. So it's the same feeling that we want here. I just don't want you to actually wee right now, but you can let those pelvic floor muscles soften. And then what we're going to do is just take a slight rocking movement, okay? So the top thigh now is going to rock a little bit forwards on the pillows or the bolster or the roller, whatever is between your knees, and then it's going to rock a little bit backwards, okay? So this hopefully will feel really nice for your pelvis, really nice for your pelvic joints. So I know, Gemma, you said you had a little bit of pelvic pain. So hopefully this feels really soothing for it. You might have to play around with the range of movement. So if a large movement feels really good for you, then do a large movement. But if a large movement feels aggravating, like it's making the pain come back or sort of start up again, then you might make it a much smaller movement. And sometimes a really big movement feels good because it stretches your pelvis, and sometimes a really small movement feels good as well. And I actually really love playing around with how small a movement can I do whilst still feeling like there's a movement. And what we're doing here is just mobilizing the pelvic joints, which is what we want. We want the pelvic joints to be able to release and move a little. And we're creating a little bit of, it's a slow wiggle of your pelvis, isn't it? The rocking movement. But if you can imagine during birth and baby's trying to move through, we're sort of wiggling the body to help create a little bit more space or change the space within the pelvis that the baby has to navigate. So what we're looking for is a super duper lazy movement, as released, as relaxed, as soft, as gentle, as fluid, and as effortless as possible. So we're going for lazy here. We're just going to take about 2 or 3 more. If you can take in one more piece of information, see if you can tune in with the top side of the pelvic floor and see if as you rock the top knee forwards, can you feel that top side of the pelvic floor gets a little stretch as you go forwards? And then a little bit of a stretch as you go backwards. So we're mobilizing not just the pelvis, the pelvic joints, but also the pelvic floor. Good. Okay, and I've got one more little treat for you here. So I want you to keep both knees bent, keep them where they are. Top hand's going to come up on top of the top thigh, and you're going to literally wiggle your top thigh. So I'm rubbing my hand up and down. I'm trying to roll the muscle around the bone. It's quite effortful, like quite vigorous. Sorry to jolt you out of your nice relaxation. But this is a really nice thing to do to help release tension around the leg, the pelvis, the pelvic floor. You can go on the back of the hip, you can go on your bottom as well, sort of grab your glute, and you want it to go all wiggly and jelly-like. That's what we want. Great. Okay, so let's just change sides. So your choice to either come all the way up and put your head on the other side, or sometimes you might prefer just to sort of come up onto all fours and roll to the other side. So we're going to be doing the same series, but just on the other side. As always, use your arms to support you up and down. When you're on your second side, just putting the roller between your shins, interlace your hands around the back of the head. And I'll get you to inhale, lift your top elbow. As you breathe in, shuffle your head back a little and then rotate your chest back as you breathe out. Oh, I feel stiff on this side. Stay here and breathe in. As you exhale, see if you can ease into the twist a little further. Staying here, breathing in, and then coming back to your start position. So we'll go now into your diaphragm release. So you find the side ribs and you slide your fingers down off the base of the ribs and you massage right in underneath the lower ribs. Right in up under the diaphragm. Remembering you can be really gentle, or you can be much more deep and firm. And then we'll hold the fingers down at the lower ribs and we'll breathe down to your fingers. So inhaling, your diaphragm stretches down, pushing your fingers out from under the ribs. Exhale, releasing, relaxing. Tucking your fingers a little deeper. Twice more, breathing down to your fingers. Exhale, release, relax. Tucking the fingers a little deeper. One more, breathing in, breathing down. Breathe in a little more, breathe the diaphragm a bit further down. And then let it soften. Take another twist. So you put your hands back behind your head. Inhale, lift the top elbow and breathe the diaphragm down. Shuffle your head back a fraction and then rotate your chest back. Get you to put that underneath arm on the knee if you'd like. Stay here as you breathe in. And hopefully you can ease into the twist a little further. I feel like for me, I have much more ease after just doing that tiny bit of diaphragm release. So hopefully you feel a bit more ease there too. And then just coming back to your start position. And let's take your side rib release. So finding your thumb and massaging a hollow between the ribs. So you put your thumb in the space between two ribs and you can follow that space up. I always get stuck at the bra strap. I can go a little further, but I can't feel it so clearly over the bra strap. If you're not wearing a bra, you can probably go further up. Change hollows if you want to. So I'm just moving to slightly more further forwards hollow and massaging up and then down. And then let's do the breathing into the side ribs. So I'm jumping back to the first hollow I was in. You can choose the hollow that you want to work with, breathing up to the side ribs now. And then exhale, soften. And two more. So breathing the side ribs wide. And exhale, soften. And one more, breathing up to the side ribs. Feel the ribs stretch. And inhale a little more. And then exhale, soften. And then we can put the hands back behind the head. Inhale into the side ribs as your top elbow lifts. Shuffle your head back a little and then rotate your chest back. And hopefully it feels more range or more ease in the movement. Stay here and breathe down into your diaphragm. And then ease into the twist a little further. Staying in the twist as you breathe in. And then coming back to your start position. Okay, so now staying just on this side, and we're going to go into the directed breathing. So placing your hand down on the lower abdomen, below your belly button, on the really lower part of your belly, letting your tummy relax. And then as you breathe in, just allowing the belly to soften. And then as you breathe out, allowing your belly to soften more. So just being really aware, this is different to what we did last week. Last week we were doing breathing in, expand, breathing out, contract. And I'm not asking you to do that now. I'm asking you to breathe in, release your belly, and breathe out, relax your belly more. It's not pushing out, it's not bracing your abs, it's not trying to distend your belly as you breathe. It's just letting the tension sort of melt away from that lower abdomen. Remember, you can move your arm at any point if you're getting sore through the shoulder or neck. We're going to take the awareness down to your pelvic floor now. So visualizing again in your mind's eye, the pelvic floor, front to back, side to side, like that diamond shape. And now as you breathe in, just allowing the pelvic floor to expand a little more. And as you exhale, let it soften a little more. So we're not doing any contraction of the pelvic floor. So breathing in, letting the belly soften, letting the pelvic floor release. As you breathe out, can you let your pelvic floor and belly release a little more? Good. Remembering, if you're finding it tricky to let the pelvic floor release, think into how it feels when you sit on the toilet and have a wee. So just allowing the muscles to release up to the point just before you might wee. Good. And then just putting the hand on the floor in front of your chest and taking that little rocking movement. So the top knee rocks forwards and then the top knee rocks backwards. And as you're doing this, checking in with the neck and the tongue and the jaw. See if you can release tension. Sometimes it even helps to do a little hum, like a low hum. So those low sounds really help to release the pelvic floor down. So if you do want to do a little bit of hum, and I can't hear you, so you can try it. You want to have like a quite a low sound, because one of the things in birth, particularly in the later stages when you're getting ready to push your baby out, is often women will start to vocalize, they'll start to groan a really low sound as the bones stretch apart. And that is often what birth workers, midwives are sort of listening for. That sound tells them, okay, baby is nearing. And that is the sound that helps the pelvis release and lets the pelvic floor soften more. So I think it's a nice thing to be aware of, certainly, and even practice a little before you get into birth so it doesn't come as a bit of a shock. So I'm just going to take a couple more here, knowing that as you rock forwards, you're broadening the back of the pelvis. And as you rock back, you're just gently compressing the back of the pelvis. So just allowing a little bit of movement in those joints. Good. And then coming to stillness. And let's take the top hand up on the thigh and give it the wiggle jiggle. So you're just going to see if you can wiggle the muscle around the bone, really allowing the muscles around the thigh and even into the glute, so at the back of the hip, and then deeper into the pelvis to soften just by wiggling those sort of superficial muscles. Good, and we'll leave that there. Okay, so we're going to come on up to kneeling. So you can put your roller bolster pillows aside and come on up. So hopefully you feel like you are able to release your pelvic floor a bit. If you couldn't feel that yet, that's okay. I definitely know that when I work with women over the duration of their pregnancy, sometimes they can't feel the release of the pelvic floor, or they can't feel the release of the tension at all the first times we do it. And it does take time to practice. And that's why it's super important to practice now during pregnancy, because if you are trying to push your baby out against a pelvic floor that can't release, that can't yield, that can't let go, it's much more tricky for the baby to be born, to come through. So practicing this sort of work, and all it is releasing tension of the muscles around the pelvis, pelvic floor region, is really key to supporting your body to give birth. Let's come on up to your hands and knees now. So hands under shoulders, knees under hips. We're just going into a few pelvic movements, okay? So I want you to rock your tail down and your tail up. Okay, so can you see I'm not moving my ribs too much? They might move a little bit, but I'm not doing a cat stretch. Well, I am doing a cat stretch now to show you, but actually I don't want you doing that. You're just sending your tail up and down a few times. Let's do a full cat stretch so you can feel the difference. So tail down, rounding through the back body, and then tail up, head up, chest up, and just notice how that feels different. Now, it's not that this is wrong, it's just that it's different to what we were doing with the pelvic movement. So they're both right, just in different contexts. Good, and then coming back to your middle point, and then just trying the pelvic movement again. So see if you can get the tail lifted, tail down, tail lifted, and tail down. And notice if you can feel, does that change the pelvis or the pelvic floor? Can you feel any difference in the pelvic bones at all? What tends to happen is your tail lifts, is there's a little bit more space in the pelvic floor, and as the tail comes down, there's a little bit of closure of the pelvic floor. It's just interesting to start noticing how these movements change the shape of the pelvis and change the shape or space in the pelvic floor. So now we're going to do like a waggle of your tail to your right and then to your left. So you're just waggling your tail right and left and right and left. And so these movements, these wiggly movements, these are similar to, you know, when I got you doing the rocking on your side, these movements during birth, they're not too effortful, but they are giving your pelvis and your pelvic bones a little bit of movement to help baby wiggle through a little bit more easily. And then we're going to take circles, so wiggle your tail to your right. You might take it down, swing it over to the left. So you're just doing little pelvic circles with your tail circling. And hopefully if you're a bit tight in the lower spine, this is also just releasing that out a little bit. Let's do your circles the other way. So tail to the left and then down. If you're uncomfortable on your hands, you can always come down onto your forearms as well. Just one more there. Good, and then you're going to start a rocking movement. So I want you to rock your pelvis forwards and backwards. Okay, so we're keeping your pelvis fairly level at this point. We're not arching your tail up and down at all. And just notice how this feels in your body, how this feels in your pelvis. And then I want you to circle the pelvis on top of the thigh bones. So we were doing circles with your tailbone before, but now the pelvis stays level and we're circling it on top of the thigh bones. So hopefully you can feel this is a different movement. So we're moving the thigh bones up inside the hip sockets, just reversing the other way. So this is a really great movement for anyone that has pelvic girdle pain, getting the hips moving in the hip sockets is really important. Okay, and now coming back to that rocking movement, forwards and backwards. And what I want you to do is cross your ankles so the knees turn out. So you've got ankles crossed and knees turned out. And I want you just to notice how that feels in your hips, in your pelvis, in your pelvic floor. I really need you to keep your tail a little lifted. So don't let your tail rock down as you go back. It might feel a little like an arch as you go back. That's better, well done. Good, and then coming back to your middle point and just seeing how that feels. Does that change the feeling in the pelvis or the pelvic floor? We're going to now turn the toes out and the knees in. So sometimes this can feel a bit pinchy for some people in their hips. So if that's you, don't push into the pinchy feeling. As you rock back, you want to see if instead you can really lift the tail up and see if you can notice how that changes the feeling in the pelvis, pelvic floor region. Okay, so I'm going to come back to these, but these are really important movements to understand, actually. I'm going to come back to them and explain them a bit later, but I want you to now come back to parallel with your feet and down onto your forearms. And we're going into a pelvic floor release. Okay, so this is basically a stretch for the pelvis, pelvic floor. I'm pretty sure we've done this already. So you're going to have your forearms down underneath your shoulders. Your weight's a bit forwards. Don't have your weight back on your knees. Now, I do need your tail untucked. Okay, this is important. If your tail is tucked down, remember the pelvic floor gets a bit closed and we want to be opening the pelvic floor. So lift your tail up and let's rock your pelvis over to your right side and swing your tail over to your right side. So now you're looking for a stretch in that left inner thigh. And then rock over to the other side. So rocking your pelvis to your left side, swing your tail over to your left side. So you're looking for a stretch into that right inner thigh. And then just alternating sides a couple of times. And notice how that feels inside your pelvis and inside your pelvic bones and inside the pelvic floor and inside your hips. I think it's really interesting how there's this idea that people will just know what to do in labor and birth, and certainly I think sometimes people do, but not always. And that's one of the reasons I'm really interested in this movement for birth, is because I feel like we don't always have the skills to sense and feel into our pelvis and what our pelvis is doing or how it's feeling. And so often we hold a lot of tension in there and aren't really aware of the movements and how the movements can make really subtle changes inside the pelvis. So I know when I'm saying notice it, you might think I can't feel anything at all. That's okay. But over time, as you practice this, you do start to notice stuff. Okay, so we're going to add on to this. You're going to rock your pelvis over to your right side. Swing your tail to your right side. Now I want you to lift your tail as you rock back a little more towards your right heel. So you're looking for more stretch in that left inner thigh and hopefully a feeling of release or length or broadening into the pelvic floor. Reverse up on top of the right knee, then we change sides. So take your pelvis over to your left knee, swing your tail to your left. Now untuck your tail. As you rock your body weight back, lift your tail and let your sit bones widen. So you want that pelvic floor diamond shape to lengthen, broaden. Reverse up on top of your left knee, swing over on top of your right knee, swing your tail over. As you rock back, untuck your tail. Let the sit bones widen. So this is where we're hopefully getting a little bit of release into the back part of the pelvic floor, and that's the part that really needs to stretch in birth. Over onto your left knee, swing your tail to your left, and you're going to untuck your tail, lift your tail, widen the sit bones, rocking back, and then coming all the way back on top of your knees and back to center. So we're going to come back up to your hands and knees. We're coming back to this rocking movement, okay? So I want you to notice firstly, as you rock backwards and forwards now, maybe it feels a little easier. I know it does for me. It feels a little easier to keep my pelvis level. So I really want you, as you rock back, to lift your tail and let the sit bones widen. There should be no tail tucking at all. Now let's cross the ankles and turn the knees out. So I know we did this before, but let's feel into how this feels. So this movement, can you feel how this closes the base of the pelvis a little bit, but it opens the top of the pelvis? So opens the inlet. So legs turned out, knees turned out is great for early labor when you're wanting baby to get into the top of the pelvis. Come back to your parallel position and just notice how that feels. So I can feel like a significant change in the pelvis, pelvic floor. When I come out of that position, I can feel much more release in the pelvic floor region. Now we're going to do legs turned in, so knees in, toes out. And can you feel this opens the base of the pelvis, this opens the outlet. So it creates more space at the lower portion of the pelvis, sit bone to sit bone, tailbone to pubic bone, and it actually closes the top of the pelvis. So not so good to do in early labor when you want baby to get into the top of the pelvis, but excellent to do during late labor pushing phase when you want baby coming out. Okay, and then just coming back to parallel. Good, sitting back on your heels. Let's just take the weight off the wrist for a moment. Well done. Let's just pop your hands in front and we're going to just give your wrist a little bit of a roll around. Going the other way. Good, and then hands out. I want you to flick. 10, 9, 8. Again, 10, 9, 8. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well done. Pulling the fingertips back, so stretching into your forearm, taking the fingers down, pulling the fingers under, stretching again into the forearm. Other side, so pulling the fingers back. And then taking your fingers down. Good, and then just giving that a little release. So we're going to come up to tall kneeling. Okay, so we're moving into a psoas release or a hip flexor stretch. So kneeling one knee down, stepping the other leg forwards. Make sure your foot is forwards of your knee, so not back behind the knee, but forwards. Just have the hands on the hips, and I want you to drop your tail down. You can squeeze this glute and feel like you're zipping up pubic bone to belly button. So some people feel it more in the hip flexor, some people feel it more in their quad. Either is totally fine. I want you to put your hands on your front knee and then lunge forwards. Can you see my body's coming on a diagonal? I haven't kept my body back in an arch. It's diagonally leaning forwards. And I want you to squeeze the tail down and the pubic bone up. So you're sort of increasing that stretch in the front hip. You can lean your front thigh down on your forearm down on your front thigh and bring up the same arm as the back leg. And just stretching that top arm up as high as you can. You might tip to the left or to the front leg a little more. Lift your chest a little higher, and you might find the stretch comes up into your tummy a bit. That would be fantastic if you can find that. Good, and then I want you to bring your hands down onto the floor on the inside of the support knee. Now, I want you to actually take your bottom backwards. Okay, so you might be on your fingertips or your hands. Either is fine. So the other knee is bent. I want you to, so my left leg is forward. So whichever leg for you is forwards, I want you to see if you can stretch that side back a little bit more. Okay, and we're looking for the stretch in the belly of the hamstring muscle. It's not a hip flexor stretch that we're looking for. It's more in this back of the hamstring. So reach the front thigh backwards, see if you can square off your pelvis. And as best as you can, you want to untuck your tail rather than be in a rounded hunched position. So lengthen your spine out and see if you can lift your tail up. Then I just want you to rock side to side. You might go a little forwards and back. And you might do little circles. Just play around with what feels good in your body. So this lunge position, and we're doing quite a deep extreme lunge here. But a lunge position like this, or even just standing with one foot on a step, is a really great movement to know to do in the middle of labor when baby is getting right through the middle of your pelvis. And that's something that you can ask your care providers. They usually will be able to tell you where baby is in your pelvis. But it's not even necessary to know exactly where baby is in your pelvis. It's just really fantastic to have tools that you can use, that you know you can choose to do rocking legs in and out, lunging one leg forwards, one leg backwards, and know that those different positions are going to impact your pelvis. Okay, push the front foot down, put your hands on the front knee and come all the way up, and we're going to change sides. So kneeling the other knee down, other leg forwards, hands on the hips. I want you to drop your tail down, so slide your tailbone down and zipper up pubic bone to belly button. Put your hands on your front thigh and then you just lunge a little bit forwards, taking your torso forwards. Okay, and then leaning down on the front thigh, bringing up the same arm as back leg and tipping towards the front thigh. Good, staying there, breathing in. Now as you exhale, see if you can lift your chest up a little higher. Good, perhaps the stretch comes up into your tummy a little bit. Good, and then you're going to bring your hands down on the floor on the inside of that front foot, and you can wriggle that front foot out a little bit if you want. And then rather than being lunged forwards, I want you to take your bottom backwards and feel like you're stretching that side backwards. So don't have it sort of rock forwards, you want to take it back. I know it might feel a bit uncomfortable. We're looking for the stretch here. If it feels like you might snap, just come out of it a bit more. You don't want to force it. And you want to try and lift that tail up rather than being rounded. And then let's rock. A little bit of side to side, a little bit of forward and back, perhaps some circles. And just noticing how this changes the pelvic bones, the orientation of the pelvic bones one against the other. It changes the shape of the pelvis, the pelvic floor. Good. And then pushing that front foot down, placing the hands onto the front knee and coming all the way back up. Okay, so just sit down on your heels. I'm just peering at the time so I can see where we're at. Okay, great. So I just want to do 2 more things in this like birth prep thing. So we're going to sit with the left leg bent and the right leg out straight. Put your hands forwards on the floor. And see if you can sit so that right hip back and down, but lifting your chest up, and behind you lifting your tail up. So you don't want to be in a rounded back position. You are trying to rock your pelvic bones forwards, and we're looking for that stretch in that right inner thigh. Does everyone feel like they're getting that? Yeah, great. So the inner thigh connects in and coordinates with the pelvic floor. So it's really helpful to release off the inner thigh a little bit. We don't want to do loads and loads of hip openers and stretches though, because the length of the muscles, whilst it does have some connection to the tone of the pelvis, pelvic floor, the length of the muscles, so doing loads of stretching sometimes does just stretch the joints, and it's actually the tone or the integrity of the muscles, the pelvic floor muscles and ligaments that we want to soften rather than overstretch. Okay, so nice big breath out to come all the way up. Let's just change sides. So bending the right knee, taking the left leg out, sitting nice and tall, bringing your hands forwards, rocking that left hip back, but lifting your tail up a little. So you're sitting the left hip down, but lifting the tail up a little. Nice big breath in. As you exhale, you might come deeper into it, or you might not. You might just see if you can soften off here. So you definitely don't want to be pushing into the stretch so much that you're tightening up. You want to just be edging into the stretch enough that this muscle feels really good and wants to release, relax a little more. Nice big breath in here. And then coming all the way up. So just bringing your legs in. So we're going to just do a deep squat. Now, Gemma, just because you mentioned you had a bit of pelvic pain, see how you go with this. This might not be one for you. You might be fine. And also it might be one that you might want to skip out. So we're just going to come into a squat. If you mirror me, you can squat down on your left foot and have your right foot out to the side. And you're going to have your hands on the floor in front. So I want you to be supporting yourself. You don't have to squat here. I mean, you might be comfortable like this, but actually I want you to support yourself. Bring your feet reasonably far apart. And then we're going to swing. So you bring your weight onto your right foot, pushing your left heel down, and actually you can use that elbow to push the knee out a little. So hopefully you feel that starts to stretch into the inner thigh, pelvic floor. So you're not staying static or still. You're moving in and out, or moving through the movement. And you can use the elbow to push the knee out, or you might find you don't need to, you might just get a good enough stretch as it is. So you can bring your hands right down and you can really support yourself, or you can be more upright. You're really just playing around with the movement and how the movement feels in your body. Okay. One more on either side. Good. And then just use your arms to bring you back up to standing. So you can bring your hands onto your knees and come all the way up to standing. Okay, so what I would love to do now is just finish off with some functional movement. We're going more into functional movement next week, but I'd love to just give you some squats and things just to put you back together after all that release work. So we are going to take a few squats. So, we haven't used the spiky ball. Let's do squats and then we'll finish off with spiky ball. I told you to bring this spiky ball, so we better use it. Okay, so feet hip width and parallel, or feet wider than your pelvis if you prefer, if you need space for bugs. And let's come down into a little bit of a squat. So knees over ankles, bottom goes backwards. Let's put hands on your lower tummy. Push into your heels, and if you can, push into your big toe joints. Make sure your knees don't come too far forward, so you want your knees back over your ankles and your bottom goes back. And let's stay here and breathe in. See if you can breathe your diaphragm down, your ribs wide, your pelvic floor down and wide. And then as you exhale, can you reconnect with pelvic floor and lower tummy? So feeling that support here. And then even in a standing position, can you feel those muscles expand and release? Let's add, so as you exhale, find pelvic floor and lower belly. Now also really drive the heels down. So see if as you push the heels down, you can feel like those glutes work a little bit more. Let's stay here, breathing in again. See if you can feel the core expand. Breathing out, can you hug your core deeper? Push your heels down, sit your hips a bit deeper into those glutes. So you're starting to feel those glutes working, I hope so. You can keep your hands on your tummy and you breathe in, squat a little deeper. And then breathing out, come a little out of your squat. If it's tricky, you could bring your arms forwards if you feel like you need to counterbalance. We're going to take 10, 9, but I do feel like it's quite nice to keep the hands on the belly so you can check in with that expansion and contraction. 7 more, 6 more, 5 more. Inhale, exhale. Expand your core, contract your core. 2 more. And 1 more. Come all the way up to standing. So we're going to just come down, come down into your squat again. Okay, so this one, feet a little wider. Hands on your tummy, knees over the ankles. Don't let your knees roll in. Breathing in here. Exhale, hug baby in. Now transfer your weight to your right heel. But shift the right hip back a little and drive the right heel down. You're looking for glute work. Come back through center. Breathing in here. Exhale, hug baby in. And then transfer over to your left. Don't let your hips swing out. In fact, take that hip back a little. Push the heel down. You're looking for glute work. Coming back to center. Come on up. We're going to take it again. So just before we do, just give your hips a little wiggle, release off that tension there. Let's take another one. So bending the knees, the bottom goes back. Take a breath in. Exhale, hug baby in. Now as you transfer your weight, what's happening to your core? Can you feel it stays engaged? Just let go. Do you start bracing your abs? Just noticing what happens. Let's hold here, breathe in. Can you release it? Now stay here as you exhale. Can you hug baby in? Sit that hip back more, push the heel down more. So really getting that right glute working. Come back to center. Breathing in, releasing your core. Exhale, hug it in. Shifting over to the left, what happens? Can you keep the core engaged or do you lose it? Does it brace? What happens? Staying here, breathing in. Exhale, hugging baby in. Sit that hip back, push the heel down more. Can you feel that glute? Coming back to center. Coming all the way up. Okay, so I want to just take a couple of little lunges. So Gemma, or anyone with pelvic girdle pain, I do suggest trying these. We're not going to be moving in and out of the lunges. So lunges are definitely contraindicated as in, you know, like a sort of an alternating lunge. We're going to be coming into a lunge and staying in the lunge. So hopefully it'll be okay. If it's not, and sometimes it's not, just come back to your squats. Maybe you do more pulses or maybe you do a couple of transfers as well. So let's step 1 foot forwards, 1 foot back. I want you to bend both knees. So the back heel is up, the back knee is bent. torso is tipped a little bit forwards. So most of the weight is on that front foot. If it's back here, you can get a lot of work in the back quad, and we want to bring it forwards and push into that front heel so we get that glute working, okay? So holding here, let's have hands on your belly. Breathing in, can you give space to baby? And breathing out, can you hug baby in? Let's take that again. Breathing in, can you give space to baby? Exhale, can you hug baby in and push the heel down more, sit into this glute more. So you should be feeling this glute working. Let's do little pulses. Little pulse down as you breathe in, little pulse up as you breathe out. Now you're in control of the range. If you're feeling really strong and connecting this glute, yes, you might work the knee all the way to the floor. If you're feeling a bit vulnerable and not so strong, it might be really small. It's totally up to you. You stay in the range, you're confident that glute's working. We've got 3 more, 2 more, 1 more. Come on up and let's change sides. Okay, so 1 leg forwards, 1 leg back. Both knees are bent, back heel is lifted. Shift your weight forward. So diagonal torso lean, most of the weight on the front knee. Push that front heel down. Hug your hands around your belly. Let's breathe in, give space to baby. And breathe out, hug baby in. Breathing in, give space to baby. Exhale, hug baby in. Now push the front heel down and sit into that glute a little bit more. So sit it back a little. Okay, we're going to add your little pulses. Inhale down and exhale up. So the knee doesn't come forwards. You need to stretch the bottom backwards. Inhale down, exhale up. 3 more. Glute lengthens as you go down, shortens as you come up. Pelvic floor lengthens as you go down, and it contracts, shortens as you come up. 1 more. Coming all the way up to standing. Well done. Okay. Oh, I know it's time to finish. Are you happy to stay just for a moment so we can get in the spiky ball to your glutes? Is that okay? Yeah, great. So I'm going to get you doing the spiky ball sitting down, which is quite intense. So I'm going to use my mat. This is to release off the back aspect of the pelvis. So right on the back of the pelvis, you have the sacrum. So the sacrum's that bone in the middle. You've got your 2 ilium or ilia bones, 1 on either side, sacrum in the middle, and you've got your coccyx right at the base. And there's those sacroiliac joints, which are attached. The glute muscles go over them, but in between the joints are the ligaments, and that's what we want to release off a little. Okay, so we're going to be going really low down in, so the ligaments are actually really low down in under. So we're going to put the spiky ball, I'm going to work on my right side, underneath the right sit bone. So I'm using my hands to make it either more heavy by taking the weight off my hands, or less heavy on my pelvis by bringing more weight into my hands. And the spiky ball goes, so it's at the back of my right sit bone, and it's slightly to the midline. So if you can feel into getting the spiky ball into the space between the sit bone and your coccyx. So you're right at the back of the pelvic floor. Sometimes this feels really good for people. Sometimes it feels really awful. So no, you can always take less weight on there by lifting up a bit, or you might even stretch one leg out and just roll the weight off a little. But you want to get right in. It feels a very sort of close into the tailbone. But you want to massage in through there. And then what I want you to do, if you can visualize where the tailbone is, you're going to massage up the right side of that tailbone up into the sacroiliac joints, or anywhere that feels good through there. Oh, it actually feels really nice. And then we're going to just take, I'm rocking my pelvis to the right a bit, so you can take that spiky ball over to into more of the belly of the buttock. Okay, let's change sides. So you're going to put the spiky ball now on the other side. So for me, it's going to my left back of the sit bone. And then I'm going to roll it into the midline a little bit. So it's going in between the sit bone and the tailbone. And remember, you can lift the weight off a little bit, or you can bring it heavier down. You can even stretch one leg out if that feels more comfortable for you. And then you're going to massage just on the left, just slightly to the left of the tailbone, and you go up on a slight diagonal triangle. So if you imagine the tailbone is the point and the triangle is going up, the line of that sacroiliac joint is coming up from the tailbone slightly out to the left. So just following that line. And if you don't know what I mean, that's okay. Just follow where it feels good. And I reckon you'll get some really good spots. And then let's roll your pelvis all the way onto the left. So you get right into the belly of that glute muscle. So if you do have any pelvic pain or pelvic floor pain, this is a really good thing to do. Release off your glutes. Oh, I found a really good spot on this side. All right, so that is one way of using the spiky ball to release off your glutes in preparation for birth. As I'm sure you know, there are other ways as well, but we don't often do this one in the studio, so I thought it's a nice one to do for the birth prep. Okay, come on up to standing. Just before we finish, I want you to just do a little squat and see how that feels. I'm not going to move my camera, but just take a little squat and just notice how that feels. For me, actually, I will move my picture. For me, just having done that little bit of spiky ball release, going into the squat feels like there's heaps more range in my hips. And that's just for a squat. So you can imagine how then that impacts birth as well. All right, let's finish there.